Good evening. Welcome to the May 4th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting for East Bridgewater. We are here this evening to begin our department budget presentations, have a high-level discussion on fiscal year 25 budget, where we are first initial pass, and we will go from there. For that, we have meeting minutes from, last date of our, sorry. Oh, you do?
Yeah, because I have to make sure I have
220?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the last meeting minutes that we had were from February 20th, 2024. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Moved by Dave, second by Lisa. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we would like to welcome Anthony Bonini, who's our newest member to the Finance Committee. Thank you for your interest. We look forward to having you on the committee.
Thank you.
Glad you could be here to start the department presentations. So with that, we'll start with the department presentations for those that are here, and then we will move to our general budget discussion. So we'll start with the town accountant. That's okay. You can talk to a high level and we can get them out after.
So my budget did not change much. For the department head salary, I've kept it the same as last year because there's been no discussion yet. I'm at the end of my contract, so there's been no discussion on a new contract. For the admin support salary, I have it at so Christine right now works 27 hours a week, and she's like a step 6. She's been here for a while. So I think she's at about $54,000 a year, but she's not sure. We're kind of just playing it by ear how long she's nice enough to stay with me before we have to find somebody else. So I put this in at what a FY24 step 1 statutory assistant would make, so it's slightly higher than what she makes, but there is a chance that she leaves during FY25, so that would cover me if she was to leave mid-fiscal year. But that would cover me if she left in the middle of the year. She gets the longevity pay of the $625. And then we put in a week vacation buyback for myself and Christine, but I might look at that. I could probably take myself out unless anything changes in the contract. Training and education, I've kept the same. We have a town accountant school in March, and then we have the June annual meeting, and then different seminars and stuff along the way. Office supplies, I just lumped office and computer supplies in the same line. And in-state mileage, the 2 conferences that we do have are in Amherst and South Yarmouth, so that's basically the only thing I really put in mileage reimbursement for. And dues and memberships is for the various conferences, committees, and things like that they have. So that didn't change. I'm still really kind of figuring these lines out because I'm still trying to get in a pattern of which conferences I go to, how often I'm going to them. Right now it's been working. I need to go, the annual school in March, I need to go at least every 3 years to keep my certification. But I'm trying to keep it at least every 2 years because God forbid something happened. If you waited that 3rd year and then you got sick or something like that, and then you're on the hook for taking the test again and everything. So, plus it's good to just keep up, obviously, with everything going on. So, any questions?
Yeah, I mean, your overall budget increase is $3,800. There's not much to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's not much to debate about.
Yeah, I mean, really the only thing, like I said, the vacation buyback's really the only thing that increased, and I could possibly play with that, like I said, depending on if there's another week's vacation in the contract or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then the department head salary.
yeah, that's, could potentially change.
Okay. Any questions for Melanie?
What do you have for interim if she was to retire this year?
So she would give me plenty of notice,
Okay.
and I would hope that we'd be able to work out something that there could be a little overlap.
Overlap training?
Yeah, we haven't got that far in the discussion, because I'm hoping that she'll at least be here through calendar year '24. It's just so helpful. She just has so much, like, knowledge ingrained just from being here for so long, so, but it's not gonna last forever, unfortunately.
Well, you can tell her she can't leave.
Right? I know. She tried, and then she changed her mind, so that was good. But I know she would give plenty of notice, and I think that we could work with it to
Okay.
get someone else up to speed.
Okay. Everyone else good? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go too
you.
far, though.
I won't.
No, I'll send it tonight. Next up is treasurer collector.
Hello.
Hello.
She didn't go far. I'm still here.
So this is my first budget, so bear with me.
I'm very good.
I did work really close with Melanie on this, so for the department heads, I didn't change that at all because there hasn't been any discussion on if there should be any changes to it, just like Melanie. I'm not in a contract, but I'm with the personnel bylaws. For the clerical salaries, we moved the senior clerk position. We actually eliminated it, and she's currently per diem during our peak times, during tax time and like excise time. So we were able to eliminate that position. We removed the stipend, Chapter 41, because I'm not eligible for it until I get all my certifications, which is about 4 or 5 years out at this point. So we just removed it from my salary completely. So the professional services for payroll and billing both went up. So Customized Data, which is our billing and our payroll company, did send us what the increases would be. A majority of it for payroll is the increase due to email payroll advices. And then for billing, I added the increase that he gave us, and I added an additional $1,500 for this year. We're gonna do bill presentment, so people are able to pull their bills online. With us eliminating that senior clerk position, we believe that this is gonna eliminate a lot of phone calls in the office as well, because a lot of mortgage companies and attorneys will be able to actually pull their real estate tax bill and just look at it online rather than calling us to get that information. So we think that was kind of like a good trade-off, if you will. And then there isn't a reoccurring fee of 2 cents per bill going forward, so that's included as that as well. It's only $700 for the year, give or take, for all the real estate, excise, water, personal property, all those bills to go out. For the supplies, I did get a printer through Bay Copy, which has a contract with it, so I included that with my supply budget as well. It's $300 for the year. And then the postage, I increased it by $4,700. There's been a 10 cents increase since last January, and the Pitney Bowes contract also increased as well by $1,000. And we're signed in for the next 5 years.
At a fixed cost?
Yes, for 5 years. It's going to be, I don't have it with me, but it only went up $1,000 for a year. And that's for the next 5. The debt.
Interest is what it is.
More
It
debt.
How much is the
includes-
debt?
So she's got the general fund debt on, where are we? So 2.4 million, 2,471,000 for the general fund debt, and then 1,041,000 for the interest. That includes a large interest payment, 137,000.
Yeah, that's.
I think, for some short-term borrowings that we have out there right now.
Yeah, 137, 129.
So, yeah, 137. So that's included in that.
So I know we'll probably get to this when you tell us where all our money's coming from. But what is falling off debt this year? A small amount?
Yeah, I think it was only a little over 100,000. And what I realized too is I need to ask Hilltop if they can run me a different report, because there are things that are excluded that are still run with the debt I thought it was separate, but there are a couple that cross over when I went like item by item. So I want them to see if they can run me some new reports with it grouped a little differently, so I can see exactly what's falling off that actually has a overall effect, because anything with a debt exclusion doesn't
Okay,
affect us, it just washes. So I'm gonna see if they can do that.
okay.
And I did email them, just a quick note about I haven't heard back about if there's any prepayment penalty, when we were talking about that.
So you said the $1 million figure, that's the interest
Interest.
payment in fiscal 25,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay. And what were the short-term borrowings that you referenced?
So we have short-term borrowings out there for a few things right now. For the sewer project, the Mitchell School paving that was done 2 years back. There's a water project that John Haynes has that there's short-term borrowing on. Trying to think, the last bit of the roof at Central School. There was like a small amount left that we had, that was worked through.
But the sewer project and what's related to that comes out of the water fund, right?
Not the sewer project.
No?
The water fund, it's not generating any revenue right now.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and we went to vote for the enterprise fund, and a discussion was shut down at town meeting for,
Is it gonna come up at this town meeting?
it's not on the agenda right now, but it's something we can talk about, Charlie. An enterprise fund for the sewer, if we wanna present it again at town meeting, or when we wanna do that.
Okay.
So, that was the plan.
So unemployment claims, we kept the same. Medicare insurance, we raised it by 4%. Looks like on average, that's what we've typically raised it in the past, and it's been enough to cover. Life insurance, nothing's changed on that end, so we've kept that the same. The health insurance, I was able to watch the GIC meeting on Thursday and get the base rates and the administrative fee. So it looks like we're going up 8.6%, but me and Melanie kind of did a detailed breakdown, and we got it to go up 5%, because there's usually a buffer in there. So we were able to kind of leave some type of buffer, just because of the GIC rule changes and what was the
Yeah,
other
just
thing?
people coming on
Just
and
people
off.
coming on and off the plan. So we raised it to 5.1 million. The Plymouth County retirement, that is unfortunately what it is. So that went up almost 400,000.
The only good thing there is that
There's a light.
there was a increase voted, a COLA increase voted earlier in the year, and that does not affect the FY25 assessment because those assessments were already set. So we had been thinking we were gonna have maybe about $90,000 increase to that assessment number. That won't be factored until FY26. So see, it was good news.
A little bit.
And what is the total assessment this year, just?
It's $4,045,688.
And what will our highest payment be at the end?
No, I don't
of
have
like-
it.
We,
It will keep going up until up until including fiscal '29, and it's supposed to be, obviously, everything can change, but it's supposed to go up by at least about 7 or 8% per year.
Every year?
Yeah.
Is there a way to get all the items that are listed under debt service? Is there a schedule that shows, like, the title of it, the amount financed, the date it was financed, the amount outstanding?
Yeah, we have a debt book. I do
Okay.
have an electronic copy of the debt book, and it does kind of break it out as to, like, when each payment's due and what the interest is, if you want. Do you have the electronic?
I think so.
Yeah,
And then
we
we
could
could
send
look
it
at
to
it and
you.
you could show exactly what information you want, and they might even be able to manipulate it.
That
a
would be
certain
helpful
way
just
that
to
would
take a
be-
look at it, and then we
Yeah.
can have it so we can understand
Mhm.
what's out there.
Yeah, and the rest, that's, the water debt went up, oh no, that didn't go up much, it only went up $30.
Yeah, the MWPAT
Yeah.
is the Fund 27 debt, and that, like she said, barely changed, and that's offset with the payments that we're receiving, so that's a wash. And the same with the water debt, the water fund covers that, so it's a
Mhm.
wash
And
in
that
the
went
operating budget.
Down $5,000.
Okay.
She's got some big numbers in there
I
for
What's the
sure.
know.
bottom lines? What's the bottom line last year to this year?
I don't know if the bottom line.
It's a 3% increase of
Okay.
12,000, not including any debt
I was gonna
service.
say, yeah,
obviously.
'cause-
That's just operational.
Even the, does that include the employee benefits? That's almost like separate from the treasurer's
Yeah.
budget.
I
would
didn't
say.
include employee benefits, no,
Okay.
so that doesn't include health insurance, that's
Okay.
just her.
So that group went up 8%. And that includes the Plymouth County and the GIC, the health insurance.
And that
Oh, you
health
guys said
insurance-
you got it to 5%.
Sorry, say it again?
The total for, with the Plymouth County, the health insurance and the Medicare went up 8%.
Okay.
Yeah, the health was 5.
Yeah.
And that's the health insurance for school employees as well as town.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay.
I don't have any more questions. Anybody else?
I was telling Dan, the only line that we had talked about at one point was her financial services line that's at
Oh.
46,000. Because if you look back historically, that hasn't been spent, it's usually around 20,000 that's spent, so Megan and I looked at that, we were gonna reduce it to about, I think, 20 or
Yeah.
25,000. And she went back one more year, and in 2018, they spent like 45,000, so we dug into that. And what it was it was a year that we needed, a bond rating done. So that cost, and Hilltop sent us a calculation of how it's
Yeah.
done. It's like how much you're borrowing, and there's a bunch that factors in. So that would be something, if we did lower it, but we did need to get that rating done in the fiscal year, it would need to come to FinCom or something for the funds. But that's one thing, if you look at historically.
So that's potential to reduce. Why wait?
See. Do you have a better idea of when we might need the full rating done?
They could always come to
Right.
For the, debt ratings? I didn't know if I had
I'm
sent.
sorry, I'm missing.
I didn't know if I had sent you the email, but I'll send it to you after and we can talk about it.
Well, we could, with the understanding, if we need it, you could come back to the FinCom on the emergency reserve,
Right.
because, you know,
It's
we are
not something
very,
we could
very
choose not
tight.
to do. If we needed it, it would have
Right.
to be done, so.
Okay, I'll mark that down.
All right. Saving the day.
Town $1 at a time.
There you go.
Okay. Other questions?
The only, I'll point it out too, in case you look at it later, that Megan pointed out to me earlier, is they reduced a position, but you only are seeing a $6,000 decrease It's because last year, when the clerical rates went up, a lot of departments had to go back and get funding at special town meetings to cover theirs. But because the prior treasurer left in the middle of last year, they didn't need to ask for more money, so their FY '24 budget didn't go up when a lot of people's salaries went up. So that's why it only looks like it's
We eliminated a
$6,000
$20,000 position, but we only reduced the budget by $6,000 because of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes.
Paul is not here, so we're gonna move
Right,
her.
and she asked if she could come to one of the Tuesday meetings.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, IT.
IT.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For you guys that don't know me, I'm Ryan McGonigal. I'm the IT director for the town. I'm presenting you my line item budget for FY '25. If you can take a look at the larger of the two spreadsheets first, we'll go through them piece by piece. If you have any questions about individual lines, it's very similar to what it was last year. On reoccurring expenses, not including salary lines, we're actually looking at about an 11% budget reduction from last year. There's really two major factors on this. We're in the process of changing our permitting program from a previous vendor to a new vendor that we were funding through ARPA. It's a reduction of a little over $22,000 per year to basically our reoccurring costs. The other piece to it too is we're considering changing managed service providers for the town. So far, I've seen a couple quotes come in, and we're seeing a reduction of about $7,200 per year in initial quotes. So I'm putting some numbers in because it's such a big reduction. I can, in good conscience, go with our current provider. Just because it's an 18% increase, not including what increases they wanted to put on me this year. So on overall expenses for software and things like that, we're looking at about a reduction of about a little under $27,000 total. If you look above it, though, I am asking for an additional full-time person for the department. I'm looking to stagger the costs over the course of 2 years. My estimated, based off talking to a number of other towns, for a trained full-time person would cost the town about $80,000 per year, give or take. So that's what I'm putting as my estimated cost would be $80,000. I would look to start this person on January 1st, hence why I'm only putting $40,000 into the budget next year, to try to stagger the cost rather than seeing one large increase for FY '25. This brings my total budget for next year, with that additional person starting halfway through the year, at a $13,000 increase, or a total budget increase of about 3.4% or 3.5% for next year. What isn't including this as well is my contract is currently up for negotiation as well, so I am just putting a straight number across of what my current salary is for this fiscal year, because I don't have an estimated number. If you look at the second sheet, I did a large number of public records requests to figure out what other towns have for a total number of municipal employees. On average, most towns have one municipal employee per 8,100 residents or 8,200 residents. Some towns obviously are higher than others. Rockland, for instance, does have one municipal employee, but they're also paying about $110,000 for managed service contracts, because they do all their users have basically 24/7 support, which is what we don't have in our managed service contract. That's one of the reasons why we're only looking to pay about $31,000 next year. we've been having some issues with trying to provide support when I'm not available. This is really the driving factor of asking for a second person. Because I am the only person, I am basically 24/7, 7 days a week. I got phone calls last year when I was in Bahamas with my wife to try to support things. I need additional support.
Anthony, can you help us?
Sure.
Unfortunately, all of our systems are going more computer-based, web-based, things like that. So the number of systems that IT is supporting is growing every year. And to have an outage where IT isn't available for hypothetically a week because they're out of the country or for medical reasons, it's becoming more of an issue for the town.
So we don't have any kind of backup service that can?
So we currently have a managed service contract that doesn't include end user support. Basically, it's server network outage. If there's like a major outage, our vendor can come in, remotely at night to try to fix things. It's to cover like major outages while I'm gone. What it doesn't cover are things like, basically end user support. If there's an issue with someone's computer while I'm gone, typically I just tell the person that you have to wait a week until I come back.
Because I noticed, you furnished this here. Easton, Situate, Rockland, and Abington look like they're in much dire more need than we are, right?
Well, Rockland, I did want to stress that. So their managed service contract is about $110,000. So some towns do make up for those costs by doing full managed service, which is an option. But then again, the managed service contracts end up being a lot higher. And the other issue I've found with managed service contracts is your turnaround time on support does end up being like a day or two later anyways. Because they have to wait for someone available to help out, and if it's an issue where someone has to come on site, then they have to schedule the person to come on site to work on that. Most people I've talked to, as far as like other towns, have had better luck with a second member of the department. Abington does have two full-time staff members. Hanson just hired a second part-time staff person last year. When you start going into some of the bigger towns, Bridgewater has 3 full-time staff members. I have the full breakdown of costs. And when I did the public service requests, public records requests, I did ask just for municipal support staff.
Hanson looks like they might have an extra.
Half, right?
That is potential.
Split.
The issue, and that after talking to the Hanson director about this, they have been great at having a second part-time person. The issue you have with a part-time person or a quote unquote lower cost person is experience. In larger towns, it would be having the second cheaper person to do the break fix stuff is great. Unfortunately, what I need is someone that can come in, mostly trained to basically pick up the majority of the work while I'm not available. If I was looking for a third person, then someone coming in at a much lower rate or a part-time would be much more reasonable because we could train that person up. That even if one person was out, we'd still have 1.5 people in to cover and to help.
So just as the police and fire are doing a centralized dispatch, is there any way, because we floated this around years ago, to have some sort of an agreement with, say, Plymouth or Hanover to say, when we need you, we'll let you know, and it's a pay-as-you-go service?
We haven't had that talk as a pay-as-you-go service with other towns. The other towns and I have a agreement in place that if something major happened in one of the towns, we could call on each other for support at no cost, just to try to, as a benefit to each other. We did have a intermunicipal agreement with Hanson. That's how my position started. It was a 50-50 split. It worked well in the beginning, but then what ended up happening was one town needed me while I was working for the other town, and the other towns didn't feel they needed me.
And that's why a pay-as-you-go might work. If you had an agreement with somebody and you could call them, and they had an employee who was willing to do this for X amount, then they, you know, we pay them. And if they have 7 people or 4 people, maybe you're not gonna be pulled like that, split position.
No, that is a good idea. The only issue I would see with it is every town has different systems. So then now you're asking to have one person that's not only trained on all of our systems, but, you know, whatever systems Whitman has, whatever systems, you know.
Yeah, but where
which-
you're having your problems, mostly, from what I understand, is end user problems.
Yes, but that's, when I say end user problems, that's, could be any number of the systems that we have. You know, hypothetically, our camera system, we use a exact vision camera system. You know, where, that's not necessarily the camera system that Whitman uses, and if it's an end user account issue, then that isn't covered under a managed service agreement.
So, Anthony, how complex is that stuff?
It depends on the network and the manufacturer that entitles, you know, the services around it. So,
Yeah, just to give another example, so we're a full Aruba house for our switching.
okay.
You know, if I were to have an agreement with Whitman like that, they use Extreme switches, so it's, you know, they're similar in theory, but it's, you know, the different command line interface.
Correct.
Now, question on the MSP.
Yep.
Is it a tier 1 or tier 2 support?
So it's tier 2 support.
Tier 2,
Yep.
okay. So the tier 1 still falls on your shoulders?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a way that you can probably negotiate to have the tier 1 within the current contract renewal for the MSP?
I priced it out, it raises the cost of the contract exponentially. Because basically the way most of these MSPs do is you have to sign up for all your users, there's a cost per month per user associated with it. With the town, I'm looking at it close to 150 employees that I would need them to support, because it's not just based off number of systems, now I have to basically support all these 24/7 individual users. So police, for instance, is, I want to say like 26 off the top of my head. So I have to, at that point, I have to pay basically per month for a support cost for that user, even if they never call it. That's how Rock at, you know, a managed service contract, roughly at $110,000 per year.
Okay. And how many employees?
Give or take 150 employees, I believe, is about what we have.
Now, on the reason why I keep going back to the MSP aspect, because it's on your line up for a yearly renewal.
Yes.
Something to discuss and maybe manage within, you know, I've done it, dealt it, my background is IT as well, so negotiated with the first, like say, if it's a 3-year contract, to do the first year and a half at a discounted rate, and then you're, you know, towards the end of the year 3, you know, you have a wiggle play to continue with, you know, expanding that out and then continue with that process.
Yes.
Is that something that you have thought through?
So I have thought about it. I'd still see a large increase in the overall cost going that way. I asked my current vendor for some ballpark numbers on it without getting hard quotes. They basically said my cost would be about $28 per month per user.
$28 per month
per user.
And that's for a 3-year contract?
For a 3-year contract.
Okay.
They wouldn't give me estimated costs going forward. They just said it could be up to a 5% increase on it for the total overall contract. That's with my current managed service provider. I did not ask for, now that I'm asking other companies for quotes for these, because the overall cost of it has gone up significantly. And to be perfectly frank, we haven't been happy with our current managed service provider. I haven't asked them for those numbers, but I have in the past with our current one.
Okay. Is it possible maybe to share and work with the team to try to get those and to
Yeah,
for
I
evaluation?
can absolutely reach out on it.
Okay. Cool.
The $28 per month per user, was that tier 1 or tier 2?
That would be tier 1 service.
Tier 1.
Good one.
And that one of that, just a little caveat too, those costs typically don't include on-site as well,
Don't include what?
on-site service.
Okay.
So you would have to pay additional costs to basically do an on-site service. Just to give you an example, I was the school vacation week. I was on vacation, and unfortunately, police had to call our managed service contract, and they asked them to come out because one of the end users was having an issue with their computer. Turns out their right mouse button stopped working, but I have boxes of mice up in my attic, which would have been a quick fix. Unfortunately, because they had them come on site and had them try to fix it remotely first, it cost us about 5 hours of support, and it's going to end up costing us about $900 to have that mouse replaced. Yeah,
They could have gone to Rockland and asked the support.
I know, but the problem is that
I
the
don't know.
remote support user didn't know what the issue was, so they sent someone out. The police department staff member isn't good with computers, and frankly, that's not what they're paid for. They're paid for. IT is there to support them in that case. If I was available, I probably would have gone down there and said, "Okay, your mouse isn't working. Here's another $5 mouse that I have from my closet." Would have been
Okay,
fixed.
so give every department a mouse or two.
Backups.
Check
Yeah,
it out.
I mean that's just a quick example on just of something that recently happened. One of the reasons why I'm asking for it, just because we not only are we paying for managed service contracts right now, but we're also paying for these companies to support while I'm not available. I do my best to, if I'm home and available, to answer my phone, but it's just sometimes that just I can't.
Who's the liaison to the IT?
That would be me.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say that I fully support Ryan. I think he does need a backup or some type of assistance. You should not be, I know you guys are all gonna hate me, but you shouldn't be required to work 24/7 and not be able to take a vacation or go away on a weekend.
Well, he
or
took
do
a
whatever,
vacation
so-
because the police had to call
so you're
somebody
good.
in.
So you're good now. So maybe it's not another, position, although I'm not opposed to that at
Well-
all. But, what other avenues do we have?
Well, I think we should to try to at least approach the subject with other towns, if we can do a pay-as-you-go, if they can
Right.
spare an employee to come here.
Yeah.
From a service perspective, I would maybe ask that we have a secondary liaison to work on that with you, and if Anthony could work with him on some of the options, so we could have a better picture of what it is, I think that would be very helpful.
It's a good idea.
I agree with that. I think that's a smart
See,
alternative.
First meeting, if you weren't here, it wouldn't happen.
All right.
So you guys can just connect, all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So, just to be perfectly clear in numbers, if we eliminate that $40,000 from that additional position, we are looking at about an 11% budget reduction. So, I'm actually in pretty good shape this year, which is
Yes, that's.
Yeah.
Because in addition to the 40 is obviously the employee the benefits as well, right?
Yes.
The health insurance and that, so it's going to be far more than that.
And no shift differential too, right? Okay, great. Perfect.
So one other question I have, looking at this number, and then I'm looking back at the capital request for the townwide user devices.
Yep.
What are those?
So we did a full influx of devices at the beginning of COVID through the CARES Act, which was great. We needed all new devices. Most of our devices were already aged out at the point that when CARES came up. So it was awesome. We basically replaced every device in town through CARES. The problem is now they're starting to age out again. So we're trying to come up with the best way to get these devices replaced because of their age. So talking to Charlie and I came up with basically a 3-year plan to move these devices out. This first year is probably a year early of when they were due. Next year would be basically the end of life of the.
Should never have said that.
I know, but again, I want to be completely honest with you, and then the third year would be the third year of the device refresh.
What's the useful life on a device?
About 5 years.
And how many devices we're talking?
talking?
We're talking about 112 total. The last device refresh we do, the vast majority were ProBook laptops, 15-inch. Because of the way when COVID happened, we wanted to make sure that all users had the ability to work remotely if need be. It's, you know, more of our admins are doing it at this point now. We could potentially move back to a desktop setup for the individual users to get some cost reductions on it that way. But you know, the vast majority of the devices we are looking to replace are laptops at this point.
Because COVID would never happen again, right?
Well, I see also on your line item, a VM, vCenter's contract. So I'm assuming that you have VMs
Yes.
licenses as well.
Yep.
So maybe a thought through, thinking outside of the box, maybe issue some VM license that is secure that you can allow users to remote in. And
Yeah, that would be another. But so we did that, just to get full transparency, we did that in Hanson. Most of our users don't know how to get it set up that way on their device. We did this, so all of our devices have, we use FortiGate, so it's a FortiGate VPN client. It's single sign-on, so they're using the same username and password they would if they're, you know, accessing on locally.
Okay.
Great.
One of the things I have thought about potentially doing, but very early stages, if the capital project goes through, is moving more towards a thin client type functionality, which would be basically a higher end of that VMware, where the devices themselves are basically the thin clients, where the users are actually logging into a server on the back end. So it would be, with a smaller department, it'd be much easier to manage the total number of devices, things like updates and things like that.
Yeah, true. The EI instance. Yeah. Then you definitely would have to go more to your tier 2, tier 3 support on the MSP side.
Yeah. But it would be easier to manage remotely.
Yeah.
If there were problems.
100%.
Right. Never knew IT was this interesting, huh?
I know. Anything else from you? Any questions for Ryan? Or additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Veterans Department. Good, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Chris Buckley, Veteran Services. For those of you who don't know me, coming on 5 years now. The first sheet, the top sheet, goes over the department for proposed FY25 with an assistant. The second sheet is without. And the third sheet I'll touch on the end is the revenue coming in passport-wise. As I stated last year, for those of you who were here, being here 5 years, I've grown the department, and it's getting to the point where I'm gonna have to kind of march in place, to use a military term, as far as growing it without an assistant. I have been able to have an intern since roughly September of this year. Just to break down, the intern is VA paid. So they go to school. They're a veteran who goes to school, comes to the office, no more than 25 hours a week. The two drawbacks to the intern position is they can't help me with passports because they can't do anything that's outside of assisting veterans. And they cannot meet with veterans one-on-one. So if they're in there covering the office, the gentleman we have right now does an absolute wonderful job customer service-wise and helps me out. But as far as being able to see more veterans, it really is stop right there. As far as he has communicated, he's able to work through the summer of this year. After that, I go right back in trying to get the needle in the haystack from Bridgewater State, Massasoit, BCC, any of the colleges around. I've got great relationships with all of them, so, you know, definitely look to continue with an intern, but like I said, that's where it's gonna kind of stop there. And then with the other line items I have, again, doing more community outreach, attending more training, is the reason why 5710 was increased, but that was equaled out by a decrease in 5731. So just looking over the last few years, that's definitely something I'm able to cross-level with no issue or no uptick. And across the board, it's just the regular 2%.
So you have the admin that comes in, the intern that comes in now, who is paid by the VA.
Yes, sir.
So we didn't have an intern before or an assistant, right?
No, I have not.
So what are the red numbers in FY '22, '23, and '24 under the administrative assistant?
So, I do apologize, scratch 23 and 22, those are just department totals from the year before, from that year. Last year is if they were, because that's the first year I put it in, that's where I did the research, and that's what the position would come out to. And then it's just an increase from last year to this year. Speaking with other veteran offices around, especially the South Shore, where we're comparable towns, this is coming in low to mid as far as what they're asking for.
So what is it in '24? That's,
He requested it.
So that's what I requested last year, Dave.
It wasn't
And then-
budgeted.
No, it wasn't budgeted,
I thought
and
so,
then
okay.
this would just show the increase. And I just wanted to put that in there just to show you the small bump that it had every year. And then speaking with two other towns that are Easton and Abington, Easton, yes, being a little bit bigger than we are, this number comes in at about, I'd say 2,000 or 3,000 less than what they were at, and they're having trouble keeping their position that they actively have going. Just because you know, if they come in and get the correct training, it's a step position. You know, definitely they could be an assistant, as long as they're an veteran, they could be an assistant and then go on to another town. So just trying to clarify the numbers for you. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is the passport totals over the last 4 years now. We may be a little higher than last year. Last year I brought in 15.5 with the passports, and then you know, this year roughly be a little bit around that, depending on traffic between now and the end of the FY. And as far as the op tempo in the office goes, that's about where it's going to be. With an assistant, we would be able to grow that. But as of right now, that's where it's at, and probably it'll stay in the 15 range without an assistant moving forward.
So the revenue that is the revenue, what portion of what you charge is the revenue to the town, I guess? For the past, like when you talk about, like, you brought in 15,000 there, I'm just trying to, when I divided the numbers, like in '23, it came out to be like 42 per application, and then in '24 so far it's 46, so is that like?
So, okay, and maybe I should have brought the fees, I do apologize. So 35, if someone comes into the office and does not need a pitcher, it's 35 across the board. If they do need a pitcher, it's 45.
Okay.
Where we're actually making some headway is, for instance, I had a family of 4 come in, we took care of the 2 We took care of the two kids, so that's 45 apiece. The mom and dad also needed a pitcher, but they were just renewing, so I didn't have to charge them the 35, but I charged them the extra 10 per pitcher. So that's where we make a little bit more headway on that.
Okay.
So I think there might be something wrong with the math. Please, bear with me here. FY '24, you have a total general fund at 284,157.
Okay.
And that does not include the 23,699.
I think in 24 it does.
In 24 it does.
It's just 23 and 22. Like that line.
Okay, it does
That-
include it,
yeah.
okay.
So in 22 and 23, our veterans benefits were 240. And then 24 and now in 25, I've met with Melanie, we've adjusted it, more of a realistic number. And it's 180, so that may be throwing it off too. And that 180 number is a steady number that will be moving forward. I don't see any need to move off of that.
So what we're raising appropriate is minus that, so it would be 260,458. Right? Is that what was appropriated actually?
In 24.
24?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Why did it go, okay. So the decrease in cost from 23 to 24 really came out of the reduction in the veterans' benefits?
Yes.
Of which we get a certain percentage back?
Yes,
correct?
75%, that's correct.
And did you just say, are we on target to spend that 180 this year?
Well, yes, we are on target to spend that. Would like to keep a little bit of a buffer in there. And for instance, so this is where I would need to increase the 180 if we came against it, is it's a state-funded program. If somebody comes into my office in the months of April, May, and June, and I put them on benefits, it could put me over. So we would have to, but as far as everybody right now, so for instance, housing, say the housing gets worse and more veterans are coming into my office, then yes, we'd have to revisit this because then there would be more veterans eligible. But for right now,
What
if
it
we
happens
keep the,
this year, you'd have to come for some emergency funding from.
correct, so for right now, 15 to 20 veterans or widows on the program. This is a steady number. If that number creeps much past 20, then I would need next year to ask for more. But there is an equal when somebody comes on, somebody comes off. So just to give you a rough estimate, we've had an average of 17 people on the program the last 5 years. I have 6 people remaining from when I took over, from original that have been with me for 5 years now. So there is a good ebb and flow overall. Just for numbers, this next year, since I've been on, will be over 100 veterans in 5 years that we've lost. And we have roughly 825 in town. So
Right. So the bottom line really is on that 180, we get 135 back. So,
Right.
and if you have this assistant, they can process passports?
yes, if I had an assistant, it would be a carbon copy of me, outside of director authority type issues. I'd still do everything, but as far as if I'm out of the office, they'd be able to process claims. They would be able to add 115. They'd have access to that system, and then they would also be able to process passports.
And you're still in active reserves, right?
Yes.
And how often do you get pulled out?
So I get pulled out, for instance, my next AT, the last 2 years now, it's been April into May. Luckily, I have the intern. He's not gonna be able to 100% cover it, but for the most part, he's gonna be able to cover it, so.
You say April and May. 2 weeks?
2 weeks, 23rd to the 6th.
Is that twice a year?
No, that's once a year. So, but that's the way it's looking. I'll hit 26 this Saturday, and hoping to do 30, and then we'll reassess from there. Well,
And do you turn passport applications away because you just don't have time?
yes, as a matter of fact, I do a lot of them, and a lot of you have come to me for them. We process them through the office. The main hours we do it, because I've got 35 hours, and I'm a veteran service officer. I'm not the, veteran services. Oh, and he gets extra hours to do the passport services. So roughly from when the kids get out of school Monday night until 8 o'clock, do passports. If someone has an extenuating circumstance and comes to me and says, I need this by this time, and the next 2 Mondays are full, then I will fit them in the later afternoon hours when I can. But there are people that are turned away. And then the other thing I did want to add is it's 50-50 East Bridgewater residents to out of town. So for instance, I did 11 before the appointment today. 6 were out of town, 5 were in East Bridgewater. And that's pretty much every Monday. That's what it looks like.
Remember when this fell with the town clerk?
No, I don't remember what
Really?
that was before me. Yeah.
Oh, come on. I guess I'm getting older. Oh, jeez.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris? Anything else you want to share?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you for being patient. Alex, if you want to come up, conservation.
Good evening, I'm Alex Welch, I'm the conservation agent for the town. My budget's pretty simple. I don't know if it gets much more simple than what I got here. Department head salaries, no change at this time from year to year here. The most significant change is clerical salaries. It's part of the clerical union contract to move up a step. So that's what you see, a compensation of just over $481 there. And then I tweaked the mileage account. I actually reduced some money out of it, just as, I have some data on how much I drive. I've decided to reduce that down. I'll say the hope is that if I one day need more money in the mileage account, that you guys would be favorable to me asking for that. But I'm just trying to be honest here with, what we potentially needed this upcoming year. Everything else is the same. Supplies, we're happy. Other charges and expenses. Sometimes we do things like trainings, just professional trainings, whether it be myself or some of the commission members taking annual trainings as well. So, that's about it.
Just giving back.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I knew it was taboo. I said, I think this is taboo to do this, but I just wanted to be
$7, so.
honest on it. So.
Can't complain.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, your budget's very straightforward.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that you even take the effort to cut where you did
Yeah.
reduce.
Sure.
That's appreciated.
Absolutely.
So, any questions?
No.
Okay.
There was a question 2 years ago. You asked how many vernal pools were in town. So there are 10 vernal pools in town.
Glad to know that.
Yes. So
Pretty sure
yeah.
one's in my.
Yes. Yeah. That was 2 years ago. He asked that question. I said, "Gosh, I don't know," but it's easy to find out, and I came equipped tonight with that
Pretty
answer
sure one
for
is
you.
in my backyard.
I feel edified.
Or on my property that I'm not allowed to go on.
Good.
Alex,
Wonderful.
what's your last name?
Welch. W-E-L-C-H.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, Charlie and Melanie, let's talk about fiscal year '25 overall town budget. So just so everyone's up to speed, we have preliminary numbers from every department at this point. Some things are still trickling in, like Southeastern just, their school committee voted and finalized their budget, so that final number came in. The schools haven't certified their budget, so they've given us estimates on things, but at least directionally, we kind of know where what we're faced with.
So I have a question before we get into the really good stuff.
What's a vernal pool?
No, I know what a vernal pool is. I was just curious at the time.
That's my question, I have to Google that.
What is a vernal pool?
I don't know.
It's, like polywogs.
Comes and goes.
Yeah, it's like.
It's not there 365, but it's there every year, depending on the amount of rain and water tables and things like that. But, so that you don't want to disturb that area because it needs to come back, it needs a place to come back.
Thank you very much.
That's where we used to
As
go
you-
to catch
as-
all the polywogs.
Right, because then you have various species that needed certain months of the year. They'll transform themselves as the year goes by or whatever, but during various periods of time, they need the vernal pool to birth their young, grow from the larvae to next stages and things like that.
Thank you so much for that explanation.
You know,
It's a good
That's not going to be
explanation.
in the meeting.
I have a question about the regional school committee budget.
Yes.
We're talking Southeastern.
Right.
Yes.
When the school committee votes on that, it just automatically gets approved?
No, because the various cities and towns, I believe, I'm following based on what I remember for Silver Lake when I was next door, is that a majority of the towns have to approve the budget.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'd have to check with Southeastern whether that's the case or not, but there has to be some sort of check to, I'm making it up, let's say that they wanted to double the size of the budget, boom, okay, yeah, everybody say aye, great, okay, and then dump it on the city of Brockton and the other communities, whatever it is, the 8, 10 communities that are in it officially. So there has to be a check through the town meetings or the city council.
I need to say that I remember years ago, on the selectmen, they had to come in to present, to vote on it, and there was a
They did offer.
big
to do
query
that
between
this
a
year,
couple of
too.
towns were on the edge. Okay.
Yeah, but I'd have to check the actual regional agreement to see whether it's 2/3, whether it's a simple majority, what,
Well, and who cast that vote?
it would be town meeting.
It would be,
Because the select board doesn't have the right of appropriation. So that I don't believe that the select board by itself could say on behalf of the town.
you mean through the overall approval of our general
Yes,
budget?
right.
Okay, not a separate.
Yeah, so again, next door, we had separate line, how the way Silver Lake was constructed is that it was a mixed district in that 7 through 12 was in Silver Lake itself. So that the 3 towns shared the cost, Plimpton, Kingston, and Halifax. K through 6 was done on an individual town basis, so that Kingston was responsible for K through 6 costs in Kingston, Halifax, K through 6 in Halifax. There was an umbrella, because you didn't want a superintendent for each elementary school or K through 6 program. So what you have is the 3 elementary schools, Silver Lake, and then a union superintendent that was a superintendent for all 4 school systems, the 3 elementary school systems and the regional junior, senior high school. So it was a superintendency, I think is what they call it, a Union 31 superintendency, which encompassed that. It's different, obviously, with Southeastern. It's pure and simple. It's a voc tech school, grades 9 through 12, done, okay. And costs are dependent on how many kids you have going there from each community, but also the minimum contributions that we're supposed to provide as part of the funding mechanism there. And the minimum contributions are somewhat dependent on the number of kids, but also on demographics. So that Brockton, I don't know this, I'd have to actually look at the data, but my guess is for minimum contribution, because of Brockton's demographics, would be a different amount than what we're contributing. But then it might be different from what West Bridgewater is contributing also, as an example. Or, I don't know about, can't remember if Bridgewater's in it or not, but, because I think we're the second, I don't think they are, because we're the
Bridgewater's
second.
Bridgewater
not,
Rain
no.
House.
Yeah, well, but again, I don't know, we have a voc tech program also to some extent, but obviously it doesn't cover many of the jobs, whatever you want, training, vocational education that Southeastern provides. And we're the number 2 school, town in the district, in fact. Brockton has the most students, obviously, but then East Bridgewater is actually number 2 in terms of number of kids going.
Yeah, I agree. I want to understand how they do things.
Yeah.
Well, I can,
Deeper this
I could
year.
have them come in.
Yeah,
one
I
of the
think it would be
dates.
good.
Okay,
We
sure.
could pick a date.
Okay.
I saw that email that she had.
Yeah.
um,
And what I said to Mark Morris, who's the business manager there, the John Shake, was I said, you're going to need to show how the number goes from 24 to 25, meaning from fiscal year 24 to 25. Because obviously, we didn't see an increase in the number of students, yet we're seeing, what was it, about 10%?
Yeah.
Give or take.
120,000.
Yeah, 114,000, but about 10% increase in our assessment.
Right.
And part of that, again, may be, I mean, there's 2 factors, is my guess. One is just the general increase in costs there. So there's a certain percentage, it went up, but also I suspect our minimum contribution went up because of changing demographics again. But I'd have to have them walk through that to see whether I'm correct about that or not.
And let me just, because it's been in the news, it's no secret the deficit that Brockton is facing as a school district.
Right.
Are they obligated to pay Southeast? Like, what if they?
If a majority of the communities say yes, they are obligated, there's no escape clause.
There's no, okay.
I mean, there is an escape clause in the sense of they'd have to give notice, we're leaving the district, but it wouldn't be good for this. My guess is, again, I'd have to look at the regional school district agreement, but my guess is the time to have notified the district that you're gonna leave in a certain year has to be more than a year out.
Yeah.
Type of situation. Because obviously, you can't, if suddenly, mind you, I'm making this up, I have no idea how many students, they've got 300, 400, 500 from Brockton, okay? Where are they putting them? Because those kids are gonna have to go someplace, and if those kids actually if Brockton doesn't offer the voc ed program that Southeastern does, and we do this with the Aggies, for instance, and they want to still go to Southeastern, Brockton then has to pay the out-of-district rate, which is more than the in-district.
Okay.
Because there's no Chapter 70 money or anything coming to Brockton, because they're paying, it's the full 100%.
Okay.
But there is a mechanism that if all of a sudden they threw in 25 new positions and just said, we need these, the towns could get
Yeah.
together and reject the budget.
Okay. Well, we'll have the school district in.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been a few years since they presented to FinCom, so.
Right.
Plus, you would think there would be some type of stipulation in the contract, too, that it could only increase by so much % without major approval across.
Well, again, I think it's an annual thing.
Yeah.
I think no matter what the change in the percentages are, it has, I mean,
I think
sorry.
the timing is difficult, because for us to vote it down at a town meeting, you're already presenting hopefully a balanced budget, and then waiting for every other town to hold their town meeting, so it does seem like something that would actually never be accomplished.
Well, if you wanted to vote down budget, yeah, if a town, one town would need to start contacting the other
Right.
towns to say, are you in or not? You have any interest in, and then, you'd say no, let's say it was a majority of towns said, oh, okay. You gotta still have a plan, in the sense of, okay, I'm making the number up. What's the budget gonna be if you say no? In that, if you didn't like it at 50, well, are you gonna like it at 48? At what point, there'd have to be some indication back to Southeastern to say, this is the budget we're aiming for. Now, again, with Silver Lake, if the town said no, technically Silver Lake could then go back, approve a new budget, which was literally the same as the old budget, and ask for another set of votes at the 3 towns. And those towns would then have to have special town meetings, just on, well, not just on that, but they'd have to have it within a certain number of days of Silver Lake certifying a new budget. And you go through that, whatever number of iterations you need to go through to eventually get to a budget. I don't know, again, about Southeastern, there are various school districts where, at some point, you may have to have a joint meeting of the 3 communities, and anybody who wants to show up, doesn't matter, vote. If you don't have a budget by July 1st, then you go to the month-by-month basis, so that the old budget is in place until a new budget goes forth. And technically, we do the same thing here. If for some reason we didn't have a budget by June 30th, that's how we operate here.
Okay. Well, let's get into the East Bridgewater fiscal '25 budget.
You have that forecast?
As of now, correct, we're looking at a $1.8 million total deficit.
And this is based on the actual submissions by the departments versus what, at least at this point, we're saying are the available resources to fund those budgets.
Right.
Which includes both the normal operating revenues, property tax, state aid, local receipts, obviously the enterprise fund monies, a few other small sources, and then we were saying the 400 and some odd thousand for free cash, but not anything else above and beyond that. No money coming out of the stabilization funds for operations, no money than the 400 some odd thousand coming out of free cash.
So, in the assessor's office, they keep that cash abatement fund. How much
The
of that-
overlay reserve.
Yeah, the reserve. Is that on that? Figured something in
It's
there?
not in there, so what we've been doing the last, I don't have the balance in front of me, but what we've been doing the last few years is we funded around 600. The abatements are generally 400, maybe a little higher. And last year, Paula had them release 200 to the operating budget, and this year, they'll also release 200 in the operating budget. A few years ago, the overlay was higher than, we put more than 600 in because there was, it was right before I
It's probably a
started here.
revaluation
Yeah,
year of
and there
some
was
sort.
just extra, after the budget had been voted, there was just extra room in the property tax levy that went into overlay. So I believe we'll be safe to draw down the 200 for a few more years. But that's really how we've been using it. 600 in, 400 out in abatements, 200 to the operating budget.
That includes not just the abatements due to someone coming in and challenging their valuation for their property, but it's also the abatements for the elderly, veterans, disabled.
So there was, so it operates now basically almost like the snow fund, right? It's, if we allocate $250,000, they spend 200, you can release the other 50.
It doesn't.
You don't have,
The snow and ice fund, what we don't spend rolls into free cash.
Right.
This is completely separate.
Right, it
would
stays in
never
that account.
roll into free cash.
so how much of a rollover do we have in there? Are we going year to year, I guess, is where I'm getting at? So if she feels comfortable holding $500,000 in there, and she spends 300, well, she doesn't spend it, right? And they use 300. The next year, if she holding back another 500 and 200?
So you're asking like what the
Right.
balance is? in
Yeah,
that
is there a
fund?
balance for how many, because they used to keep it, if I remember, in years, they used to like try to keep 3 or 4 or 5 years in that
There's
account.
definitely a balance in it, at least probably 500 or 600, but that's being pulled down by taking the 200,000 out. Because when we're taking the 6, we're putting the 6 aside, we're paying out at least the 4, and then we're putting the 2. So right now, we're kind of holding it steady.
Okay, you hold the level across,
Yeah.
okay. Because at one point in time, we had like 5, they used to hold it by years or what they wanted and would have to hold it for so many years. You felt comfortable holding it for 3 years?
Well, and in fact, yeah, what happened, it was just a few years ago that the state approved having one overlay. What you had were overlays for each
year.
year.
Okay.
And then at some point you said,
Right, that was,
you know, you saw, at some point you said, we know we have a reserve for any tax cases before the appellate tax board. Okay. We don't need any more money than what we would, if we lose these cases, we have enough money to cover that cost. Do we have more money than that? Yeah, let's release it. The assessors declared a surplus and make it available for use at town
Surplus
meeting.
overlay, that's
Yeah.
right.
But we now have one combined fund that covers everything, so that the assessors need to leave money for the normal annual abatements and exemptions. But they also have to leave money in there for any tax cases that are still outstanding.
Yeah, because I just remember back, we had a fight to say, let's release this much, because we had years on it.
Be nice if we had that again
Well, we
this year.
well, I think like we went up from 100 to 200 last year, and that will start drawing down the balance. But I'll get the numbers and pull it together so you can see exactly. Like, I don't think we couldn't sustain 300 from overlay over a few years.
Well, I'm just glad for clarification that they made it one fund. That was the big.
Yeah,
thing.
sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I'm one
Well,
fund.
he's been around for a while.
A little longer than I have.
We've established that
But
tonight.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, look, and I know I asked you this earlier, Melanie, and I forgot your answer. Well, I think I remember, but the 1.874 billion shortage, that doesn't include a placeholder for
Correct, it does.
open contracts.
So we have open contract, it does for the school, and when I looked
For the
at John's
schools, yep.
notes, it looks like he did include an estimate on his open contracts.
Now, when I talked to him on Friday, they had a budget subcommittee, my understanding was, yes, he had put money in there. The teachers, thankfully, are not due in fiscal '25. There you have a 3-year contract, the third year is fiscal '25. It's already built in there, it's fun, but it's a 0 actually, because they took a little bit larger numbers in the first and second years. But I think it's assistant principals, and there's 2 or 3 other.
Custodians.
Yeah, but
and
not the size of the
significant.
teachers.
Right.
But yeah, he has money
Teachers.
in there. But
So-
it doesn't cover our patrol officer situation, which now, we have fiscal '24 outstanding, because we haven't settled, and as far as I know, we'll go into mediation or arbitration. And then that also means we haven't done '25 either. So these are not the real numbers. They have no bearing on reality. But if we have we need 100,000 for fiscal '25, we'll need 200,000 probably for 100,000 for fiscal '24, we'll need 200,000 for fiscal '25, because fiscal '25 will have to cover both the increase from '24 and its own increase in '25. Like I said, those are fictional numbers, but just as an example. And then we have the library, which is not huge by itself, obviously. I think it's like about 10 employees, but we're going through negotiations with them right now.
And that's just FY '25, is that effective for FY '25?
Yeah, we'll see. We don't have a settled contract, so we'll see whether we have to do anything for '24. We've got the 6 department heads that don't have salaries set for fiscal '25. 5 of them have contracts, and as Megan said, her salary, when we had her appointed treasurer collector, didn't get settled for fiscal '25. So we've got 6 people with they either don't have new contracts yet or don't have a amount for fiscal '25. Then we also have the non-union personnel, which are department heads that don't have contracts, period. They just don't have contracts. And there's a couple of people on the confidential level who aren't in the clerical union, So obviously the staff of the selectman's office, also fire, police, admins.
Treasurer and accountant, the assistant treasurer and the assistant town accountant.
And then also the business manager, or whatever we have calling over at DPW.
Yes.
So, none of them individually would make a huge difference, but it's not just the unions that we still have to
Right.
look out.
And so this number comes in with, so revenues were projected, right? So taxation, local aid, everything. The only, and it's with a reduction in free cash from 1.2 million to 448,000.
So the reason it says 1.2 million is because to make the budgets actually comparable, I had to go back through the special town meetings from last year as well. So at one point last year, from free cash, we did special town meeting articles for the fire contract, the clerical contract. I had to add those into the FY24 budget, and they were funded from free cash, or else we wouldn't have comparable numbers for FY25.
Okay.
So that's why that number
And how
seems
much
high
was
to you.
that? That was about 300,000 or 400,000 right there, right? Because I thought we were down
Right.
to 800.
It was.
Yep, that's why it seems so much higher.
Is there a projection on, so the sick leave buyback happens when somebody retires, correct?
We
For their
have
contract?
At least one, Nancy Hill at the COA, and she just sent that number. Did you?
I haven't-
have it fresh in. It's significant. I mean, under 50, but over 25 maybe. I'd have to take a look back at it. But that,
Are there projections from police or fire that we might have more of these?
we haven't
I don't think so,
seen
unless they're,
anything.
they haven't done any separate articles, and unless they're already included in the budget, but I can confirm with them.
Because we have been paying those, like Melanie said, out of free cash.
Yes.
So
Another thing
I
we've got
think
to
as
stop
we
doing.
face the uphill battle this year of how are we going to balance this,
Mhm.
we were doing the right thing and reducing the reliance on free cash in the budget so that we had it for sick leave buybacks
Right.
and capital projects and everything else. But I feel like our hand's gonna be forced to reverse course on that.
Right.
At least for this year.
Say that again?
At least for this year.
For this year, yeah.
Oh, I
Well,
see,
it's-
for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna be in this, unless something changes dramatically at the state level, we're in this pattern until fiscal 30.
And what I talked to Dan about earlier today is even with, this year, yes, we have free cash available, we have healthy stabilization funds, but even with that, we can't sustain these numbers for the next 5 years. Just the way that the budget would compound over the next 5 years. Our reserves can't sustain it, and we would also come into FY30 having eaten away almost the entirety of what our Plymouth County assessment will drop off. So
We have
whether
to
we,
attack
even if we
that.
do reverse course and use more of free cash reserves for this year, it can't be this 1.8 number.
So if you used $1 million, for instance, this year, I'm not, again, just picking a number. If you use $1 million, you've got to spend the 26, 27, 28, 29, that same $1 million, because you're not going to get $1 million of new revenue coming in to replace the $100 million of stabilization that you're going to spend to cover the operating reserves. And we know that we'll still have demands to increase the budget anyway. And health insurance and retirement will eat up most of, not all, but most of the increase in our property tax every year. So, Melanie's points, I mean, we can do something limited, but it's really almost just good for a year, because you're making the commitment for the next 4. And you still have to cover how you're gonna handle the increases during those 26 through 29 without the money, because you're already spending the stabilization fund down. I mean, it won't completely disappear, but, because we've got, the school had asked for this information, but the combined percentage of our stabilization funds, and I know, philosophically, we had set aside the capital stabilization fund for a specific purpose and everything, but town meeting ultimately makes the decision about how to use those monies, one way or the other. But we're at something like 12% of our operating budget combined between those two funds, the regular general stabilization and the capital stabilization. But obviously, if you draw down 5 of that, you're losing, we're much higher than the average community in the area. Well, at best, we'd be average, if not below average, at the end of 5 years, just doing that $1 million drawdown every year without actually solving our problem for those 5 years. Because we're going to be having the same struggle in '26, even if we.
Right.
And, Dave's 1.8 versus me, and you still got a problem. So, I mean, I don't know that I expect a decision from you all tonight, but in terms of budget negotiations, in terms of talking to the individuals who, department heads with contracts and everything like that, I want to get some feedback from you all about what you're willing to do or not willing to do. If you're going to hold the line, I mean, one extreme is, and we've talked about these scenarios, one extreme is we're going to just do the 400 and some odd thousand free cash number as we planned a couple of years ago. And like it or lump it, we're going to, we've got the $1.8 million deficit, and it won't be, if you're going to be doing that, in both cases, you don't start off with everybody's budget and reduce. What you do is you say, this is the revenue we have, here's our fiscal '24 budget, how much money do we have left, and start allocating the difference between what you have available for fiscal '25 and increases in revenues and what you have available in fiscal '24. And you know that some things, death and taxes in essence, are inevitable. You got the retirement, you got the health insurance, you've got, unless you start off with a premise you're not going to lay people off to deal with contracts. So you're paying, people who have contracts right now, you're going to pay them what the contract says they're going to be paid, whether they're union or non-union. And then you say, okay, do we have any money after doing all those things? And if you do, then you make, you prioritize and say, if we've got $300,000 left, we've got $150,000 left, where is it going? As Dan has pointed out, we've got a lot of hard decisions to make. Or and then you can do the same thing, but throwing more money in there. Whether it's $500,000, $750,000, $1 million every year, say, okay, now we have this much money. What things can we fund? What things are we going to say no to? But I wouldn't start up where what people's requests are. I'd start at the fiscal '24 budget and look at the differences between those and say, okay, which things we're going to make some choices here. And I don't want to imply that any of this is easy. It won't be, because, and I'm not picking on the school in the sense of that the school is the fault of all this. We've got obviously all the chickens are coming home to roost. We've got health insurance, we've got retirement, we've got other increases that we're going to have to deal with. But I am going to say, just in terms of obviously the school alone, if the school is asking, John Shea had met with Melanie and said 1.2 million is what we will need if you take the gross school budget, subtract Chapter 70, subtract their tuition income and things like that, what are they going to need from the town side? It's going to be an increase of 1.2. Okay, well, we don't have that either. Yet, if you saw this, the summary pages from them, you saw, okay, well, special ed is up this much. The various bus contracts, not just the normal yellow school bus contracts, but the special ed transportation costs and all the other school bus contracts are up also. You're not going to be able to do all that, so we're going to, something won't happen, let me put it that way.
But some of that's mandated. I mean,
yes,
the
I
special ed,
understand.
like,
Well,
can't.
and that's going to be a problem. If we agree that those costs are mandated, which I do, and you plug those in and you say, well, if we put in all the mandated costs, what's our deficit? Okay. And the problem is that the mandated costs are actually greater than the 1.2. But if you put those in, are we willing to go into the capital stabilization fund and take money out of that? Or are we gonna say, no, we're gonna have to cut back $1 million in the operating budget? Not on a particular department, not a certain percentage, but we're gonna have to make recommendations and say, sorry, you are gonna get less money in fiscal '25 than you got in fiscal '24.
So in the school budget, when they present and they say, here's our line item, they show us, we vote a bottom line at town meeting. School committee votes where to spend it.
Yes.
They're building their budget forecast off what was voted at town meeting, not what was actually really spent in that category. Correct?
I think that John Shea goes through line by line of what actually is spent in each category when he's building his budget for the current year.
But our comparison is done off of what they spent the last before, what was approved at town meeting the year before.
It's what was approved at town meeting we have it line by line when
Yeah.
it's approved at town meeting in our financial software, yes.
So it would be good to see, this is what line by line was, and then see what was the actual at the end of the year. Because if there was a higher expense here and money was moved over here, we don't see that in the forecasted budget because we're voting off what was approved at town meeting the year before.
Yeah, John, I should be able to give you fiscal '24 approved, fiscal '23 expended, fiscal '24 expended as of, let's say, February
Well, fiscal
29th.
'23, we'd like to see
Yeah.
what was approved
Right.
and what was spent.
So I think we should have that for every department.
Yeah, I think we should have, and the other request I would make is, I'd like to know from all the departments over the past 3 years, what roles are now incorporated in their budget that at one time was funded by a grant, ARPA fund, or any other source besides our cherry sheet. So,
I'm just thinking out in my head, I don't know that there's anything.
Fire has some
Yeah,
right now,
right, 'cause
currently.
they have the federal grant, you're right.
But other than that, school department, I don't think, I mean, DPW doesn't, no one in this, COA does, but their grants haven't changed. They still have all the same grant positions that they've always had, well, always,
Yeah, they're
at
not
least
being
since I
funded
know
by
of.
ARPA or any of the
Right.
federal.
what, so their own grants that they have, if that grant expired, and they've now put them on the town, I wanna know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
No, I get it. I'm just saying that hasn't happened in the last 3 to 4 years at least, while I've been here for.
And they're not CARES or ARPA funding.
Oh, yeah, CARES and ARPA funding.
We didn't
No,
pay
no,
any,
but
so-
we haven't been paying for positions outside of the school,
Oh,
CARES or ARPA.
well, then we'd like to know what those are, right?
Which-
They funded some positions at the school with
Yes.
ARPA.
Yeah, well, for instance, we know, there's the ESSER money that they get straight out to them, which has been funding positions. And in fact, I think there's a note from John showing, they're gonna lose the ESSER money in fiscal '25. They've got it for '24, and he mentions that in his summary page, the first page. Then we have ARPA, which is a $300,000 for the additional counselors there. They've got that, the year we're in now, '24, and then also in '25. We've talked about this already, is that going into '26, we already have if we're gonna continue to fund those
Right.
positions, we've got a $300,000 hole.
So it hasn't been added yet, it's just.
No, no.
The ESSER 3 positions, from the sheet that I've seen, it looks like it has been added,
Yeah.
yes. So that's a conversation that
So
will
that's just.
Yeah.
okay.
have to happen.
So for that 1.2 million for the schools that they need, that's short, is that included in that overall 1.8, or is that
Yes.
less?
Yeah. And on the free cash, so the proposed revenue for fiscal '25 shows the free cash segment of that toward budget at 448,000. So I'm assuming we're estimating free cash to be at
Well, we know our free cash right now,
There's
so we had free cash
1.4
certified in
million.
the fall, was a little over 2 million, 2.2 maybe. And then, so that's what this budget cycle would draw down from that 2.2.
But we spent some of that in October, right?
So, yeah, I think we're at like 2 million.
And what did the capital projects come in at?
It was what, it's over $1 million.
Yeah, like 1.2, 1.3.
Yeah.
So there's
That's just
money
what's been requested.
there
Yeah.
at this point, free cash.
And I think when we're saying we have a $1.8 million deficit, we don't. We have a $2.3 million deficit because that 1.8 is using $448,000 of free cash.
Right.
So
Correct.
we,
But
just to
I
keep
just-
in mind when you're talking about how much, if we're gonna, try to hit a certain deficit level that we think we can fund.
But we
just
also
keep in
have to be
mind
very
that.
careful because, as Charlie said, this is until 2030.
Right, and that's what I
If we
showed.
take dramatic steps now,
Right,
we're gonna have a ripple effect for the next 5 years.
right, and that's what I
And-
talked to Dan about.
Yeah, I think you did a good job, sorry, to put together, if there's ever going to be a consideration to take from stabilization, there has to be a 5-year period that we're looking at where we know contractual obligations, retirement obligations, average healthcare costs, and we have to project out because we can't take in year 1 and then hope everything's gonna get better. We need to know in year 5, we're not gonna have
Right,
any
because
money
like I
or
said,
whatever the
it was
situation.
the
But just
1.8.
as today, in year 1, we put something in, it affects us for 4 years. Year 2, it affects us for more.
Right.
We have to go as far down the road as possible here before we cut our heads off using stabilization money.
Mhm.
Do we know if out of the $1.2 million deficit for the schools, are they going for any grants like they did last year?
They go for grants constantly. I get probably an email or 2 a month for new grants that the school gets. So they are, the ESSER was just from COVID was a pretty widespread. They go for everything and they do pretty well, in the grants that they get. So I know that they're looking, anything that's out there, they're trying. I mean, they'll get $4,000 grants or $80,000 grants. They're trying for anything that's
Mhm.
available. So.
So just high level where we're at, I think we're meeting every week during the month of March. I think every week we'll start to fine tune and come back with a little bit better vision, but at least wanted to put it out there where we're starting at, and that it's not
Pretty.
Yeah. So,
Well, I know we're gonna be meeting every week. Do you have any sense of your direction in the sense of willingness to use the stabilization fund in some way, whether, for instance, on a tiered basis, and again, these aren't real numbers, if you're gonna use 200,000 this year, 400,000 next year, 6, 8, and $1 million, for instance, because obviously the budget's gonna be increasing. So rather than do it flat and know that you don't have any more money than you had the previous year, you built something in so that maybe you end up spending the same amount of money during the 5 years, but it's tiered to reflect the fact that things will cost more in fiscal '29 than they will in fiscal '25. It's one way. Another way, if you're going to be using stabilization fund. But if your direction is, no, we're going to bite the bullet this year, that's how it is, and at least then during the next 4 years, we will continue to not use free cash stabilization, and whatever increases we have, they'll be built against the 3 places where we have our revenues: property tax, local aid as minimal as it's been or will be, and local receipts. Because, like I said, I'm involved in negotiations with the library. I'm involved in eventually we get to the control officers at some point. If our philosophy is we're getting out of the using free cash and stabilization money business, that I can convey that as part of negotiations, for instance. And that includes working with the department heads. If we're saying we're going to use some, and Melanie can then run more numbers again, I will know whether we have any leeway at all when I'm negotiating with them to say, okay, I can, in good faith, say we can afford a X% increase in the budget during the next 3 years. or not X, but X% increase in wage rates in the next 3 years.
But I think that's where we need this bigger
Mhm.
5-year plan to say
Okay.
like what comes due when. So like as an example, in 20,
We got a
Six.
$300,000 if you're gonna cover the counselors, for instance, or the school.
Right.
that plus you have the teacher's contract is up.
Right, but the thing is,
So-
but for fiscal '26, right now, we haven't negotiated that. I'm not saying
We
they should
haven't,
be
right.
zero.
But what I'm saying is like, if we know historically the
Yep.
contracts have been at 3%,
Right.
2.5%, whatever that we come up with, if we can model that out to say like, okay, if every contract renewed at 3% over the next 6 years or 5 years, and then we had healthcare go up by this, and then we had, what else is going up every year? Retirement going up every year and everything. And here's where we know revenue is
Right.
gonna go up by only
Yep.
2.5% plus whatever.
Mhm.
Here's where we're at the end of the year.
Yep.
I think we have to look at that to say like, is it even,
Yep.
should we consider everything? Free cash, stable, we should consider anything. I mean, we have a town to run and it's fair to look at everything.
Well, and if you spend all the money on the operating, you have nothing for capital, and suddenly the
Correct.
roads,
Right.
roads don't get paved.
So that's what and I think if the situation is honestly, not to be alarmist, but this dire over the next 5 years, we have to be transparent and real about it. And if we don't have true conversations with people, the town should be helping us make this decision. It shouldn't be the 6 of us up here and, I mean, we're just blessed with this position to try and, try and move the town forward, but,
Rather than say cursed.
yeah, I know, but I think we have to look at every option in all fairness to every department and every member of this town who relies on the services of those departments, and
But, so I'm gonna put my 2 cents in. Okay. First of all, I'm in no way favor taking anything out of stabilization fund this year for the budget, due to longevity of our problem here. I think what I would recommend, or what I would like to see, is we gotta live with what we have right now. Then we have to find out what is the impact to these departments and figure out our priorities from there, what we may want to add in or whatever. Because whatever we do this year, if we, it could get draconian in 3 years from now. I think if we get more settled this year in what our cost is and get really in a line, we'd have a better picture of where we stand to forecast the next 4 years after that. And quite honestly, just thinking in my head about a few things, I don't see any ability for us to add this year or next year. I would think it would be the 3rd year we would have to go in because of the ripple effect for the 4th year and the 5th year. So, I mean, we don't even understand what the impact would be if we had to live within our constraints right now. What is it? Well, we gotta cut 3 firefighters, we gotta cut 2 policemen, we don't know. Then we can backfill from there. But my opinion is we hold the guns right now because we don't ultimately wanna be in a really bad situation in 2027 where we have to lay off half of the town.
I agree. I just don't know, based on these initial numbers that have come in and some of the increases that are mandatory, and some aren't, and we have to go through and dig all those out. I don't know that we even have enough to, without doing severe cuts this year.
All right, but still,
Mandatory stuff.
on the mandatory stuff, what I understand, this is mandatory, you have to pay X, Y, Z, you have to do this. So we make an estimate that this is what it's gonna cost us for next year. What was really spent? Did all this stay here? Did this not stay here?
No, we
Did
need to
this
look at
here?
that, yep. So a couple things I think that, just to make sure we don't forget. So, one was we wanted to see the
Actual.
debt falling off, or the debt schedule that,
Yeah, like I said, I'm just gonna have them run one that's more accurate to the effect on the operating budget, because without having to
yes.
take things in and out.
And then I think the town department financial report.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that I hadn't sent you like last year's like budget to actuals. I haven't sent
Right.
that, so, yeah,
And can we have it this fiscal year? Is it,
year to date.
can it run through 2/28 or 2/29? Or is that
Yeah.
not closed yet? Okay.
Yeah.
And capital committee's meeting next week on Monday.
Mhm.
So I get to be here Monday, Tuesday. And we'll have some conversations about some of this stuff. I'm not so sure what the number will be.
Just to see if I understand the place that Charlie finds himself in. It seems as though you're saying that unless you have some kind of general understanding of the sense of the finance committee, it's gonna be hard for you to go into those remaining contract negotiations, and be able to have your arsenal or your toolkit, identified, because,
Right,
so
because I
it's a
can't-
chicken and an egg
Well, I
thing
can't
right now.
negotiate, I can't negotiate in good faith and put a proposal on the table that has a financial consequence unless I know the money's gonna be available to cover that
Yeah.
change. It doesn't mean, as I said, I don't mean, if I need more direction, but I don't need specifics yet, but, thankfully, it's only 2 contracts, and one of them, there's nothing happening, because we'll go into mediation or arbitration, and probably by the time it does, I'll know where we're at.
That's what I was gonna, do you have meetings with library anytime over the next 2 weeks?
Yeah. But we have, yes, we do. I'm not gonna get, at some point, I gotta keep my mouth shut
Right.
unless we go into executive session. We didn't post for exec.
But if we took 2 more weeks to figure this out and look at some of these projections, that's not gonna kill your negotiations?
No.
Okay,
Maybe that's the thing to do then.
yeah. Like, I think we need what we asked Melanie for tonight. We have to look at this long-term plan to see where we're at, to make, I don't wanna make an uneducated decision.
And we haven't
So one of the
seen a
ways
line
you could
item.
say is, here's last year's budget, take the $400,000 that we're gonna put for free cash, break it down on a percentage basis and give it to the departments based off what their percentage of their operating budget is. Or where are you gonna spend it? I understood what I said.
I think.
Well, I think I
got it,
understand what
but
you
it's
said,
not
but
free
I,
cash that you would look at, it's
Well,
the increase in revenue.
yeah, you'd wanna look at the entire increase in revenue.
And you'd have to back out the
Yeah.
mandated expenses first, so you'd have to back out contracts, you'd have to back out retirement, you'd have to back out health insurance. So,
Why?
well, I mean, you don't have to back out contracts if you're,
Well,
Well, if they've already been negotiated. you
right.
can-
But I guess what he's saying is if you're only giving a department $20,000 and their contracts are going up $40,000, they have to figure out what to do.
But then it would be, if we had $100,000 and a department had 32% of they would get $32,000. Somebody had 60%, they'd get 60,000. Then they would know what number they would have, and we would understand what the impact would be.
right, but that's not, as Melanie said, that's not the only place we're getting it. The 400,000 is, as it is, we're dropping that. In the sense of, if you're gonna say, the difference on the 400,000 is whether you're gonna do anything at all. If you're gonna do a 0 on free cash, but the 400,000 is already built into the resources available.
425,
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, if the free cash, all right, so, well.
The
so-
400, last year we used 800 and some,
Right.
that
Right,
reduced.
so that's the
last year.
available funds that are there, so if there's 425, everybody has last year's bottom line number, and you break that 425 up.
Well, I
to
think you
say-
would look at the increase in revenues from FY '24 to FY '25,
yeah, I mean, if.
like
I'm-
bottom line revenues, everything
Yeah.
considered.
If we're going to see, call it $1.6 million, let's say, increase in revenues, it's a round number in that vicinity, you could divvy it up.
Right.
Now, we would throw some of that gets thrown out because, as an example, the enterprise funds for water recycling, as an example, they operate on their own. EBCAM, they were all operating on their own, and we eliminate them from that series of calculations.
You eliminate health insurance, you eliminate retirement, debt
Well,
service.
unless we've included the increases already.
Oh, yeah, I was looking at it, just the increase in revenues.
I mean, you'll meet next week, what Melanie and I can try and do is give a couple of scenarios to you, yes.
So with that, so next week, we're scheduled to meet on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. I believe we have police and fire on the
Which
agenda.
I won't be at because unless, well, I don't know if that matters, anybody goes down the hill to the school budget hearing.
Well, so, but that was gonna be my point. I think that somebody from this committee should be in attendance at the school budget presentation. Lisa and I are the liaisons. I'm happy to go, but obviously if that lasts 45 minutes, then I'd swing back up here. I can always watch the budget overview on.
I'm not gonna let
film.
anybody spend any money.
No, so I'll plan on starting at that meeting down at the schools, and then I'll walk over to finish here once that's done.
What time is their meeting?
6, which is the same time as ours, which is fine. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Mandatory, it's
Everyone's
just
gotta overlap. Yeah, so that's Tuesday.
Can I ask, at what point do we consider some kind of an override?
Unless there's anybody willing to support it, then we don't. Right, I've not yet run into somebody who says, Charlie, why can't we do an override? Because my understanding from everybody that I've talked to is that they all feel that the town would not support one. So while it's scenario number 3 in my head, it's something that I'm not spending a lot of time on because the thing is, you still are gonna need to come up with the backup plan. If the override fails, you need, because the easiest thing to do let's say we did this. May 18th, you're gonna have an override. May 13th, you vote 2 budgets. You vote an override budget, you vote a non-override budget, so that you don't have to have another town meeting if the override fails. So that you show to the town, here's a budget with the override, here's a budget without the override. If the override passes, you get budget A. If it doesn't pass, you get budget B.
And I think the citizens would be wanting to know what the real impact is if we don't do this. Because some people will have this much of a threshold, and other people will have that much of a threshold, and some of them will have that much.
But I think, like Charlie said, presenting 2 budgets is how you would present to them what the impact would be. So the police department or the fire department or the schools are gonna get X amount. If the override doesn't pass, they're gonna get Y amount if it does pass, and that's.
But I think
that's
that's why the
effect you get or you
projection
don't.
that
Right.
has to be put together is so important to look at, because if we know, we can estimate our revenue, right? I mean, we have a pretty solid, we know we get 2.5, we know what new growth projections are, we know what new taxation is gonna look like. And if we know what that number is, and we know that we have so many departments renegotiating contracts, I mean, salary is our biggest expense, salary and healthcare, right? It's simple math. If contracts continue to get negotiated at 3 to 4%, and our revenue's 2.5%, you run out of money.
Exactly.
So,
That's a simple
like, I mean,
bottom line.
it's simple, so
Yeah.
we have to look at where that break even happens, or whatever you wanna call it, and
Well, and also to Charlie's point, I think that the environment that I sense and hear also is a belt tightening environment right now. It's a worry about the economy right now. I know 10 people have been laid off from their jobs right now. And I don't think that going and saying, we're gonna spend more is,
I also worry where we'll be eventually, hopefully presenting for debt exclusion with a central school in the next
I agree.
few years, that's, to ask people for both things would be a difficult situation.
But that's why I think almost if you have like a comprehensive financial plan that includes all capital, whether it be, I don't care what department it's tied to.
Right.
I mean, I talked with, John at the DPW, and he's they do a great job scraping by year to year, and they repair a lot of their own stuff, and they have that great fleet maintenance division, but some of the heavy equipment he has is 30 years old. I mean, and some of it they can't even get parts for anymore. So like, and they've been really great about limiting their capital expenditures, but I said, at a certain point, that's just not gonna be able to happen anymore. And you're either not gonna have equipment and the town will lose services, or we have to spend money. So if we're not realistic in putting this in a plan,
Right, we can't say, oh, for the
Can't.
next 5 years, we won't do capital
Right.
projects, that's not possible.
right,
I like that idea of a 5-year lookout.
So we have this year's capital. As soon as we figure out this year's capital, the committee, the plan is to do a forecast that, like one that was done years ago. It has been done for a couple of years. Because Anthony's gonna help me format the form and stuff.
but I think it's overdue and something we've been talking about doing. We just have to do it. Did a little bit of work for all of us, but. Any other questions on general budget?
Yeah, so you mentioned about grants, right?
Mhm.
Is there a document of what has been spent all the way up to, well, not spent, but received, in the sense of grants up to date from each of the departments?
I can run like year-to-date, I can run reports of, because the way we do our accounting, if it comes through a state grant, it goes into one fund. If it comes through a federal grant, it goes into another fund. So that would show, I think that's probably, would be a good start for what you're looking for. It's, the software that we use is a little limited in reports. You know, sometimes you have it exactly in your head what you want to see, but getting it in front of you. But I think that would be, what I'm thinking of at least would be a start.
Is it difficult to get that out of your system?
Not what I just said, no, but sometimes it's difficult to do what you want with it.
So you might need somebody to help you maneuver the system a little bit and maybe help you create custom report or something, right?
Is this your friend Anthony as well?
Yeah, so I was
Do you-
gonna help Ryan, but, you know.
No, we can get, usually the software company is pretty good if we want something to do a certain thing, but it's like the software itself is very limited in like the way that it dumps into Excel and things like that, so it makes it difficult.
But the reason why I'm asking this is just to get understanding, are you including that as part of your free cash as well?
No, so nothing in the grants, nothing with the grants is in this $1.8 million deficit that we're talking about, or in free cash, or anything like that. The grants are accounted for completely separately, and nobody, when they submit their budgets to us, grant positions are not included. So those are separate. You're welcome.
Good question. Any other questions? Any other discussions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
By
I'll
Mr.
second that.
Walsh, second by Karen. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
So you want to talk tomorrow?